So now we will turn to our keynote speaker. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to our distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Ellen Percy Kraly. She is the William R. Kenan Jr. Professor of Geography and Environmental Studies, Emerita at Colgate University, a leading scholar on migration, past editor of the International Migration Review, and you will note in her bio how Dr. Percy Kraly has also brought a lifetime of innovative thinking and demographic research to the field of migration at national and international levels. She's also expanded her curiosity and action into environmental reform and supported in real time local refugee communities and responses. In short, I will say that Dr. Percy Kraly is the real thing, curious, tireless, both in thinking and acting, always from her heart. And one, therefore, that CMS is proud to call a friend and a colleague, and whom tonight we will honor at our gala with the well-deserved CMS 2025 Excellence in International Migration Scholarship Award. Thank you, Dr. Percy Kraly.
Just here is fine. And where's the clicker? Just this one? The clicker?
For the presentation.
Yes.
Right here.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. All right. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mario. That was lovely. That was lovely. Good morning. It's an honor, truly, to be here with you this morning and to be invited to participate in this critically important symposium. Hi, Holly. I cannot begin to express my gratitude to the leadership of the Center for Migration Studies. I'm humbled and I'm very honestly nervous. You can hear it. But I feel the strength of friendship and love in this community of committed scholars and advocates who've come together this day. We have a daunting task before us, witness to hope, promoting just and humane migration policies. Promotion requires our action. Just and humane requires our specifying, even measuring, principles and values of justice and humanity and inherently human rights. And hope. Perhaps the most daunting of our aspirations for today, hope in this moment for action, justice, and humanity. But the theme, the challenge before us is right, and I commend the organizers for challenging us to engage in what should be. In these next few moments, I'd like to offer some reasons for hope by bearing witness to trajectories in international migration studies, work among scholars, and finally, to students. I will reflect upon examples, long and shorter trajectories of progress in international migration scholarship that complement the themes of interdisciplinarity, data accessibility, and collaboration, and touch upon prospects for the future for gaining momentum in the advancement of just and humane migration policies through evidence, knowledge, and education. My hopefulness, as Mario touched upon, emanates from my home, my communities, from the students I teach, from the new generation of environmentalists who understand that wilderness preservation only makes sense if everyone benefits now and in the future, and from colleagues, friends in Utica, New York, who create community out of many cultures. Shelley Callahan, the executive director of the Center in Utica, is with us today. Raise your hand, Shelley. In the face of challenges to the U.S. refugee admissions program, the Center in Utica, and there probably is snow there now, continues to partner with the city of Utica and regional organizations to support migrants and resident refugees guided by the following vision and mission. And Mario, notice, let's see if I can do this. Yep, a little circle there on homemaking. Recall 2 years ago at this very symposium how the concept of home emerged earlier in the day and then became threaded through our whole discussion. And that really had an impact on me and my colleagues at the center as our new neighbors in Utica make their homes within the Mohawk Valley. I also find hope in the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, which we'll be talking about later today. The very idea of the Global Compacts and the potential of migration scholarship in continuing contributing to better, safe, and just and humane migration governments, I find inspiring to the point of being naive, certainly, but there's so much potential. Each of the 23 policy and programmatic objectives of the Global Compact embodies a research agenda to inform, to enlighten, to monitor, and assess migration policies and programs. Now, my plan to empirically express and support my hope was tempered recently in reading this paper by Narajani Sarathan, Rodney Knight, and Kelsey Marshall, Why Migration Researchers Often Struggle to Impact Policy. This was recently published by the Migration Policy Institute. This is a good paper. We should all read it. It's a very good paper. It outlines and reveals empirically factors limiting the impact of research on policy and identify 3 broad factors which constrain the policy impact of migration research: persistent fragmentation across disciplines and geographies, uneven access to reliable data, and deep structural inequalities in the voices that are represented in the research process. This important work by Sarathan and her colleagues is well grounded in a large-scale international survey of migration researchers. Their conclusions hold general weight. But with optimism, I suggest perhaps a different research design might yield an alternative perspective on the potential for policy relevance of migration scholarship. By choosing a different unit of analysis as opposed to individual researchers, perhaps we could turn to research issues, research questions and programs, and in so doing, we might observe momentum, trajectories toward more inter, multi, and transdisciplinarity, better accessibility in data and training, and third, more collaboration and co-production of research and knowledge. Or at least we might identify models of success that might be replicated. So this is my project this morning, to identify broad themes or trajectories concerning the promise and potential of migration scholarship. And yes, I'm being selective in my analysis, but recall, I am committed to revealing opportunities for hope. Let's begin with the trajectory of interdisciplinarity within migration scholarship and consider a very fundamental analytic issue: the demography of international migration, which is really part of the creation story of the Center for Migration Studies. The International Migration Review emerged in the 1960s through the common vision of Father Lidio Tomasi and His Eminence Silvano Tomasi to marshal the social sciences, and in particular social demography, to address extant and emergent trends, patterns, and consequences of international migration and population movements. Recall, well, some of you may recall, that population research in the 1960s was highly animated by anxiety over rapid population growth, overpopulation, and the implications for the environment. Think about the population bomb. Research focused on fertility and mortality. The U.S. Commission on Population Growth and the American Future was organized in 1969 to consider national population dynamics and the rationale for a population policy for the United States. Within the scientific reports organized by the commission, only one paper, and there must have been 40 reports, only one paper focused on U.S. immigration as a dimension of national population dynamics. Keely was the author. Charlie considered U.S. immigration policy in relationship to social and economic outcomes. The formal analysis, the mathematics of population dynamics, of the effect of immigration on U.S. population growth, however, was essentially non-existent in the commission report. Well, the analysis did exist, the formal analysis, but did not warrant communication. In his analysis of the possible paths to a stationary population, which is a very particular form of ZPG, zero population growth, Princeton demographer Ainsley Cole demonstrated that zero population growth, population stationarity, was possible, was consistent with positive net immigration. Now think about it. It's a bit counterintuitive. We can bring people in, but we can still achieve zero population growth. It's counterintuitive, but in a formal demographic sense, it is true. This has huge implications for immigration policy, huge. But Professor Cole never published the formal solution. In the commission report or elsewhere, he didn't think it interesting demographically or in terms of national population policy. That was how low international migration was on the ladder of the population sciences. Professor Cole was very pleased, he was charming, however, to share his calculus with Charlie and me, which we published, and using estimates of emigration produced by Bob Warren, we developed models of U.S. immigration growth under more realistic demographic scenarios. How far the demography of international migration has evolved. And we now have a robust literature on the demography of forced migration. I'm looking at Craig, you're studying forced migration at Connecticut right now. There is work being done on the demography of displacement and forced migration. And the International Migration Review, edited by Holly Reid to my left, has had a great deal to do with that trajectory of growth, providing a forum, a space for the communication of theory and research on the social demography of national immigration and international population movements. And we have found in preparation for the 60th anniversary of the journal that the public scholarship, the engagement, is increasingly geographically diverse. I didn't move that one. And with a broad array of countries and authors involved in the publication. The momentum of work on the trajectory of international migration also continues through professional organizations, including the International Union for the Scientific Study of Population, IUSSP, and also interdisciplinary research institutes throughout the world. The number of scientific panels supported by IUSSP is increasingly robust that focus on migration and population movements. And the membership on these panels is required to be geographically diverse. We could also undertake a content analysis of the activities of the Population Association of America to reveal similar expansion of interest in international migration, mobilities, refugee migration, and displacement. And just on the heels of this symposium, the Vienna Institute of Demography is hosting a 3-day conference through the Wittgenstein Center on the demographic perspectives on migration in this century. And as I said, our work in IMR for the 60th anniversary issues shows not only increasing geographic diversity, but also interdisciplinary tendencies towards issues of pluralism, multiculturalism, inequalities, racism and discrimination, and anti-immigrant attitudes and values, about which we'll hear in just a few minutes. Emergent research themes demand and engage interdisciplinarity, perhaps most clearly concerning the confluence of climate and environmental change and migration and displacements. But also interdisciplinarity is demanded in the study of migration and health, as well as gender and gender identity. Second, let's turn to evidence concerning data accessibility and training in migration methodologies, analysis, and interpretation. And I believe we can demonstrate that through almost an industrial growth of data hubs, portals, interactive websites, to access to both international and national data sources, that what we lack is not access to data, but effective access to data. I think the Center for Migration Studies represents a true model for effective data access. The Data Democratization Program, crafted and nurtured by Bob Warren and Don Kerwin, extends outreach, personal outreach, to users and support for users to engage these data. This is a model that should be replicated and is being replicated at other research institutes and international organizations. And one can only witness the appetite for access to data at the International Forum on Migration Statistics. Have any of you attended that forum? Yes, Holly, a few others. Well, if you haven't, it's every 2 years, consider it. It is a smorgasbord of interests and programs and ideas for data generation, data collection, measurement, and analysis. It's really a joyful event. People by government statisticians who really want their work to matter. So I commend you to the IFMS at its next forum coming up in 2 years. Another measure of access to migration data and methods is tapped by interest in training and in methods of migration measurement and estimation. Over the past several years, we have found strong response to training workshops directed by Guy Abel, Professor Guy Abel at the University of Hong Kong. And these, again, are characterized with an interest in knowing what to do with the data and ultimately how to communicate data results. Holly, I'm turning to Holly as editor of IMR. Recall our identification in our stock taking for the 60th anniversary issue in our introduction. We identified at least three areas of opportunities for impactful research in our introductory essay, and it's the third of which here. Come on, there we go. The third of which I think speaks to this third issue of collaboration and inclusion in international migration research, the peopling of scholarship. We posed the question then in that essay whether IMR should give critical attention to the role of inclusion and meaningful collaboration in published scholarship. Implicitly and explicitly in the special issue in the Journal on Migration and Human Security, which addressed the right to remain and concepts of home and homeland, we see that sort of collaboration with critically provocative and creative essays authored by people from all corners of migration research and advocacy, reflecting connections to home, security, and comfort. And I suggest that such a collection represents a step toward building an inclusive community of migration scholars. And just this past week, Ms. Pope and her colleagues at IOM have opened the 2025 International Dialogue on Migration in the form of a global forum that brings governments, community leaders, and experts together to focus on one simple goal: making migration safer, fairer, and more humane. This is a strong step toward building a community of knowledge generation, action, and advocacy that evens the field, so to speak. But to continue the momentum in collaboration and inclusion, and a segue to my final point, I would urge and I advocate the inclusion of students, graduate students, as well as undergraduate students, even tertiary and primary students in the study and engagement about issues of migrants and immigration. Full stop, students. Migration scholarship, evidence, and values-based migration policy needs students of all ages to engage scholarship and evidence critically. Not just critically needed, but using critical skills. My teaching experience in teaching undergraduates has been a privilege. I've got a colleague here from Colgate University, Nicole Simpson, who's an economist of immigration. I think we both consider it a privilege to teach, to work with these young people. And we find in them a hunger to use their skills to make a difference. I taught my first course at Colgate on population issues in 1985. And I really thought I could move these students by explaining what an infant mortality rate of over 200 meant. 1 out of 5 children dying before their first birthday. That just by having that number, that should move them almost to tears, if not to action. I failed at that. I couldn't get those numbers to sing the way photojournalism, for example, could move and be so compelling. I didn't achieve that goal. But 2 weeks ago, I was giving a special lecture on U.S. refugee policy in an educational studies class at Colgate. And I was presenting data from the UNHCR on refugees and forced migration, really to introduce the data portal. I wanted to know that these data were available for interactive analysis. And then I offered a back of the envelope calculation using UNHCR data, comparing the level of forced displacement, the stock of total numbers of persons displaced in 2024 to the total mid-year population of the world, and came up with this number. It's actually a little higher than this. And there was a gasp. Nicole, there was a gasp. And I had never really heard that before. The students got it. They understood the scale of the issue. They understood the unevenness in the geography of displaced persons throughout the world. Their investment, our investment in the curriculum, in critical skills, in the analysis and evaluation of evidence and argument regarding international migration should be an essential part of our promotion and action plans that we're talking about today. But it is also my sense that these students want to be guided by values, first by values. One of the students in this class said, and I quote, "I think as young people, it's easy for us to have more clarity around a just and equitable vision for the future. Our understanding of what's ethical hasn't yet become oversaturated, contaminated with what's political. I think often the overlap of these two get in the way of just productivity." I asked this group of students what message they wished me to deliver to this symposium, and I selected these 3 to share with you. Just looking at the third, a just migration policy requires removing the idea that belonging must be earned. Refuge should not be structured around proving worth. A humane migration policy begins by recognizing displaced people not as a potential labor or burdens, but as individuals whose human capital and dignity already exist. These messages give me hope. what I believe is and can be the momentum of migration scholarship gives me hope for our abilities as migration scholars and advocates to bear witness to evidence and to communicate, to listen to one another, to promote justice and kindness in migration policy and in our communities. I thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, very much. Again, always for your heart and your long experience in this. We have a few minutes, so we're going to push our break so that we have a little bit of room for a few questions from the audience. Antonia and Nadia have mics there, and they can roam, as it were, to you. But let me just maybe start with a simple but hard question, I think, because I think in this moment in time where we are always struggling to, yes, we have the data tool on our website at CMS, and I think it's a good one. And I think it does answer the question of access, but I don't think we've answered the question of expression well enough. And I know our first panel will, in a sense, touch on that question directly or indirectly on sentiment, public sentiment. But how can you advise, let's say, CMS for what it can do to put out and express numbers in a way that touches the students as they did in your class, who are obviously probably intrinsically well-disposed? But how do we do that in this moment in time? And can you offer some advice to folks like me?
Thank you. I would go to this third issue of collaboration and inclusion, and that includes people who are professionals at communication. I wish we were all, as those of us who publish at IMR and in JMHS, the two flagship journals of the Center for Migration Studies, we're very good at interpreting results, but then making those results compelling. Remember that number versus a photograph depicting children at risk. We need to make those numbers compelling, and I do believe marketing with the private sector, people who do media and public relations, letting them listening to us, but also we should be learning from them how to best communicate our results. But it's partnership. We're all deep in the details of what we do, but we need to actually come together and spend time together to actually communicate those results in short papers, quick papers, in all the social media. But you all know that. I do think, actually just listening to the news this morning, I do think we have to fundamentally protect the freedom of speech and what goes on in our classrooms to allow us to build those skills that then kind of move up through the careers of young people to help us do that communication. If we stifle the very evidence that we're talking about, and that there is a tendency right now in higher education for that to be happening, we won't have the content to express. But I do think rapid response in terms of policy relevant, program relevant research requires partnership with the professionals who can do it. I mean, I would love to think that my PowerPoint is going to just win the day. It won't. But there are other people who can, really make the results compelling. And it means spending time with one another to form that trust and confidence that the message is clear and right. So.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Anybody else? questions? Right behind you.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. How would you go about promoting a greater number of courses in universities or in high schools on immigration and the fundamental aspects that would incite people to be more aware of the situation? If you could do that on a full-time basis.
Thank you so much. And your name? I'm sorry. Yeah.
Bill Canny.
Sure. Thank you. I'm almost looking at Nicole. I mean, so at Colgate, we have found migration to be a growth industry, not in the terms of individual courses, but as content within courses. We have colleagues, for example, in English literature that talk about mobilities and the mobility paradigm. It really, in film studies, the issue of displacement, migration is really peppered throughout the curriculum. I think you would find that at many, certainly liberal arts institutions, because as Amy Pope began her presentation, it is part of the human experience and human history. So I would say the content is there. To link it to policy issues and the issues facing and causing us distress and engagement today, for example, I think linking migration to different sectors of experience, social structure, and economic development is key. Climate, health, over and over again, issues of inequality, issues of racism. So connecting population movements to these other sectors of public policy and other sectors of humanity is very, very important. I do think we have to engage the arts and the humanities in helping us, in helping us actually express some of the issues facing us. We do have a chilling effect right now in terms of curricula and freedom of speech within our classrooms. And ultimately, it takes academic leadership to hold the line, and faculty members themselves through our professional organizations to make sure we're allowed to speak truth to the evidence. So I'm actually, I always go to to an empirical corner, but I bet if we did a survey of curricula throughout, both in the publics and in the privates, in terms of tertiary education, we would find a great deal of attention to migration. It's just freestanding courses on migration probably are a little less prominent, but you're going to find the issue really peppered throughout, certainly throughout the liberal arts curricula. We do find, in my particular corner of demography, a little bit of a narrowing. And again, it's really, this discipline of demography is very much challenged by interdisciplinarity. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. The academy is changing. 50 years from now, we're going to see, we probably won't see traditional departments. We'll probably see something very, very different that reflects the mixing of ideas. So I actually, if we can just still have academic freedom in our classrooms, I'm quite hopeful about a growing attention to issues of human mobility and displacement.
So no light task. We have to first sort of preserve constitutional democracy, and then see where we go from there. All right. I think we are ready to move to our next segment, which is our break, and reconvene here in about 7 minutes at 10:20. But let me again thank you, Ellen, thank you, Dr. Percy Kraly, very much for your work. I appreciate it.